tomorrow. And then my brother Kwabena hooked up another presentation for me at Purdue on Tuesday. So it looks like it's going to be a nice week for Runoko Rashidi. And this is the way we wanted to start. All right, let me do this though, since it's up here. Let me do a short presentation on the Moors. This will just take a few minutes, and then I'll do the main presentation. This will be something different, and all of it deals with the theme of Black history before and beyond slavery. Now, the word Moor means black, it means scorched. In fact, Moor is my mother's maiden name. I didn't realize it, the significance of it at the time. But it's a word that comes from Europeans, and it means black or scorched. And the Moors have a very rich history. Among other things, they're the people who introduced civilization to Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. So since I was just in Morocco, let me just show you these images of Moors. This is from Italy, and this is a plate with the image of a Moor on the inside. This is what they look like. The Moors are described as black as pitch, black as a crow, black as a raven, nothing white about them but their teeth. And it's another chapter of African history before slavery. So I'll just go through these quickly. This is in a museum in London called the Victoria and Albert Museum. And this is something else I found in that same museum. Now, I went in there initially. I don't have the piece that I really went in there to see. And I was supposed to meet a brother. This is in London about a month ago. And the brother wasn't there, but I figured we'd meet up at the artifact that we both came in there to see. So I found the artifact, and I'll even show you that if you like. I did a count this morning. I tested it to see how many photographs I actually have on this one hard drive alone. And when it got to 781,000 photographs, it just cut off. Now, I've been telling people I had about 150,000 photos. So I decided to copy them from one hard drive to the other. And when it got to 781,000 photographs, it stopped and said there's no more space on the other hard drive. Can you imagine? So that means I'm carrying around with me close to 1 million photographs. And that really is an amazing thing. I didn't even have any idea. So anyhow, I'm in the museum, and there's an older white woman working in the museum. This is called the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I asked her what the piece was, and she was happy to point it out to me. And we saw it. I eventually met her with the brother. And I said, you know, kind of halfway joking, because I usually don't have much to say to Europeans. I'm so gun shy. I usually just leave them alone. And sometimes I learn better than that. So I said, hey, she was friendly. I said, you know, by the way, are there any other pieces in here of African interest that I might be interested? She said, oh, yes, for sure. So she got up immediately and went to what was essentially a file cabinet and pulled it out and says, you'd be interested in this one. Now, this is an odd piece, and I guess it straddles the period where you have the beginning of the impact of the transatlantic slave trade. And this was in a drawer now that was closed. If she hadn't pointed it out to me, I never would have known what I was missing. This is the Tsar of Russia 300 years ago. He is Tsar Peter I, also known as Peter the Great. In fact, he is responsible for the Russian city of St. Petersburg. And he's got his head on this little black boy, a page. This child eventually took the name of Ibrahim Hannibal. And he is the maternal great-grandfather of the father of Russian literature, a man named Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin. So this is an incredibly rare photograph that I didn't know anything about. And the reason it's in this section on the Moors is because he is known as the Moor of Peter the Great. Okay, I'll go through here quickly. This is a druggist jar in 16th century Italy. And you can see the image of the Moor there. Now, a lot of us study the Moors in Spain and Portugal, but apparently there was a huge Moorish influence and presence in Italy. I'd like to see a lot more work done on that. This one I also found in the National Portrait Gallery in London. And all of these have some relationship to this brief presentation, to the Moors. This is a portrait of Ira Aldridge. Ira Aldridge was the greatest actor of his time, and certainly in the 19th century. He was an African-American, but because of slavery and racism, he had to leave the United States to practice his profession, acting. And he went to Europe and became a sensation. And he was used in Shakespeare's play, Othello the Moor, or Othello, where he played a Moor. This takes us to Coburg, Germany. And I was there in December 2017. And Coburg is a city, let's see if I have another image. Yeah, these are all from Coburg. Coburg is a city in, I think it's in Bavaria, and the patron is a Moor, historically the patron of the city. And this is a manhole cover. So as you walk all down the streets, especially of the inner city, what's called the old city, you're walking on these heads of Moors. Isn't that interesting? Now we should have something like that in Gary. Jackson 5 head, maybe. Okay. Now these are the images in Coburg. And that took some persuading for me to go to Coburg. I was by myself, heavy, heavy, heavy snow. I didn't know anybody. I'd never been there before, but I was assured these white people are very friendly and I would have a wonderful time. And these are the kinds of things I found. Look at that. Now this is at City Hall itself. And there's a statue of a black saint, Saint Maurice. All these are in Germany.
Is this a specific Moor? Because they all seem to be similar.
Well, this is Saint Maurice right here. I'm not sure if these represent Saint Maurice or they're just generic images of Moors. Do you? Okay. Well, that is interesting too. All of them have the big hooped earrings. And you see that, wow, see, you guys are really making me think. You see that also in relationship to the people called the Nubians. And I'll show you that in the major presentation. Well, y'all are going. I might end up showing me in pictures right now. I'm in a good mood.
And they all seem to have that same woolly, curly hair. Mm-hmm. It's really defined.
So you're the major instigator and troublemaker, I see. Now look at this pin right here. Now, we were talking about the sister who's going to marry in the royal family. You know, there was a controversy a month and a half ago, where another woman in the royal family wore a brooch with the face of a Moor. And a big deal was made out of that because she wore it at an occasion where the sister is going to be. I started to say, you can take it off and give it to me. To me, these are beautiful. Look at these Moorish pins. This is interesting. Now, this is the coat of arms of a recent pope, not the current pope, but the pope before this one. And I don't mean any disrespect, I just don't know their names. And he was German, and this is his coat of arms. Now, he has the head of a Moor with a crown. I've never been able to figure out quite what that means. Does that mean he has Moorish lineage, that his family fought the Moors? What would the relationship be? And the crown is particularly important because most of the time when you see an image of the Moor or a Moor, he's either bareheaded or he has a bandana or scarf. Now these are Berbers. And I'm always talking about black love. It's a big deal to me. I don't hate anybody, but I'm of the belief that black men and black women need each other to heal. I know we bring a lot of baggage. Of course I don't, but everybody else brings a lot of baggage in a relationship. But we need each other. Somehow, if we can't do that, then what's the point? Now, these are images of Moors in Prague and the Czech Republic. And this is a Moor in chains. And what they're doing is they're holding up, that's the Italian embassy in the Czech Republic. These are about 300 years old. This one I found in Budapest, Hungary. And this is a fortress that was established in Gibraltar by the Moor, by the general who led the Moors to Spain in 711. This is what I mean when I say you see typically images of Moors with scarves or bandanas, rarely with the crown. This, by the way, is from Sardinia, and this is from Corsica. This is an image, a statue of a Moor in Paris. It's called simply the Moor, or El Moro. And this is just a cursory study. Now these are Moors in Spain. You can see the black figures here, and then they're fighting these white Spanish Christians over there. And there were also black people who fought with the Spanish. These are Moorish nobles, black, playing chess. I show this one a lot, with a white servant and a black servant. Yeah, I would love to see more of our children get this information. I'm of the belief that the more you know your history, the more you love yourself. And the more you love your history, the more you And the less you know your history, the less inclined you are to love yourself. I think we can stop this epidemic of gun violence, misogynistic, behavior of disrespect for black women. This is where the Moors surrendered to Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492. Now you see a difference here. Now this is an old flag. And so what you have is a blindfold. They're being led to the gallows. And that was deemed politically incorrect. So you see how they changed it? Now they have it on their forehead. I always say if I ever get married again, and I would love to, I'm going to give my wife this ring, my fiance. This is a stone called bloodstone. And this is in the country of Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but the country of Georgia. So you have all these images of Moors. These are Moorish tailors. What does it say down at the bottom? The clothes make the man. One has yardstick, or whatever it is, measuring tape. Obviously, I don't have many clothes made. And the other has the material, and the other has some shears. This is in England. I'm told this is a Canterbury Cathedral. I've never been to Canterbury. Even though I like England so much, I'm going to try to move there for 6 months or a year and just do some research. The possibilities are tremendous. Another image of a plate from 16th century Italy. And this is from the Pucci family. The Pucci family was the second most powerful family in the Italian Renaissance. The most powerful family is the Medici family, which had a prominent black figure in it. Look at all of these. And a black saint. This is Saint Maurice. They have more of those manhole covers. Here's your knight in shining armor. Another Moorish king. This is the figure named Saint Maurice. This is in Riga, Latvia. And this is in Tallinn, Estonia. You can see the head of Saint Maurice at the top. There's a detail. Another one of Ira Aldridge. El Morto again. These take us to Portugal. This is in also Riga in Latvia. This is in a 500-year-old church. These are in Venice. Here's an image of a Moorish king from Slovenia in Eastern Europe. See, almost none of this history has been written. It's not like the information is done. I don't know how that sister got in there. I hope there's nothing else compromising in here that I don't know about. I don't know how that sister got in there.
She's from Wakanda.
Yeah. Oh, is she?
She looks like she's from Wakanda.
How many of y'all seen the movie already? It's a good film. Wow. Black Panther. What movie? It's the movie. Okay. This is the grown-up Ibrahim Hannibal. I showed you him as a little boy.
You said he was the grandfather
of Pushkin, maternal great-grandfather. And these are Moors in various parts of Morocco in the south, or Berbers. You can always tell Berbers because they have these tattoos on their faces. And you can see the physical similarity. There's something about black women, I tell you, they just have, I don't know, attitude or what, but there's something about the way the sister is looking. She could sit right in the front row and nobody would think of her twice. You know, we stand out in the crowd. Oh, these are images from Morocco. There I am looking cool, cool, cool. That's the cool Runoko Rashidi, scholar, legend in his own mind. This is in Marrakesh, Morocco. Now these are some different kind of black folk in Morocco. They're called Ganawa. And the Ganawa are the descendants of people who were recruited into the Moroccan armies about 400 years ago. And now they perform a kind of a religious music. So you can see, we could go on and on and on. This is just another chapter in our history. Look at this one. Now this is in a museum in Brussels, Belgium. And look at this one. This is done around the same time. Here you have a Moor riding a nautilus, a sea snail. And this is in a museum in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut. This is another image of a Moor done around the same time. This is in Nuremberg, Germany. The solid go ahead of a Moor. This is in Bavaria, Germany, Munich. And look at this one. This is in Dresden, Germany. I guess this gives me an opportunity to kind of show you the work that I've been doing over the last few years in documenting African history. It's really taken me all over the world. Now, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. A few years ago, I set my own record. I visited 27 countries in 12 months. And this is, not with a grant from the Gates Foundation. Your president, number 45, Donald Trump, didn't send me a check and say, Runoko, you're doing a great job destroying white supremacy. Here's some money. So that's why these presentations are so important. And the products up here. I don't like having to peddle my wares, but I'm going to do whatever is necessary to help reconstruct our history. I think that God has given me a gift. I think He gives all of us gifts. Now, what we do with it is a different thing. Okay? All right. Now, having shown these initial images, just to get you warmed up, let me do the major presentation that I came to do, and I'll try to be quick because I've already taken up a lot of time. Now, I did a variation of this last year, so this is a little different, but I'll go through them quickly. Can I get some water, please? We got a good turnout today. Is it the weather or what? Good thing I didn't come last weekend, huh? Could be me. Come on, you must want something. Well, it's encouraging. I'm going to put this microphone down. Everybody hear me? All right. We're going to go through here quickly now. This is the great scholar, Dr. Asa Hilliard. And I know he was close to Pastor Wright. And so it's always good to start with Asa because a great scholar and a good friend. My name is Runoko Rashidi, by the way. And I'm your presenter this afternoon. Thank you, Pastor. And a couple of my books. My newest book, My Global Journeys in Search of the African Presence, and my book for children, both of which are on the table. What I don't have a picture of, what I'm really pushing today is this new calendar. I know it's already late in the year, but it's a collector's item, and it has my best photographs on Egypt. So those are available for sale too. Now, we just go through here quickly. This is a stone incense burner from ancient Nubia, and this is the first known kingdom in the world. And then I'll just go through these images on Egypt very quickly. And the good thing about it is, these pictures I put together about a year and a half ago. And since then, I've been back to Europe 2 or 3 more times. I got much better pictures. And the best pictures I get, to be honest with you, are not with this big, expensive camera that I have that's very, very heavy, but my little cell phone. This is called the Scorpion Mace head. And what I hope you can see here, let's see if I can focus it just a little bit. Yeah, it's a little sharper. You see a king from ancient Egypt with a scorpion in front of him, and this is about 5,000 years old. This is the first king of Egypt. His name is Ahamena. I'm going to go through here quickly and show you these images. This is a king named Zoser, and under Zoser, that's a terrible photograph. That needs a little work. The world's first stone building was erected, and it's also called the Step Pyramid, and this is the man who designed it. Now, I talk about him a lot. And of course, this is Imhotep. Imhotep is important to us because he is the world's first scientist. He's the father of medicine. I always say, if there's one figure in history black children should know, it's Imhotep. He is not a king, but he worked under a king. And he's considered the father of medicine. He's an ancient writer. He is a physician. If he's the father of medicine, obviously he's a physician. He's an architect. He's a poet. He's really a remarkable person. And this is his mother. And you can compare her with these images from the Omo Valley. Now, all of these pictures I'm going to show you now are originals. These are all pictures I took myself. So you can see something of a comparison between the mother of Imhotep, and this is maybe a better one right here. And then you can compare again and again. And you tell me which is the best. I think this is my favorite. But I think that's probably more accurate. And that's not bad either. That's ochre that they put in their hair. I'm gonna take another group to Ethiopia in April, May. You come with me if you like and see for yourself. These are just ancient pyramid builders. For example, he's responsible for this pyramid. So you can see these are early pyramids. And you can see what they look like. And it's a very, very odd feeling to be in these chambers and to know that you're in a building that's almost 5,000 years old. Obviously, not everybody has the reverence for them that I do. Look at the trash down there at the bottom. And the people who live in Egypt, for the most part today, have nothing to do with ancient Egypt. It would be like people living in New York today and their relationship with the Aztec and the Maya. There's really not a relationship. Now, this is the first so-called true or classic pyramid. And this is what it looks like up close. Now here you can get a sense as to the size of it by the people standing there. Around 700 years ago, an Arab general tried to break into it. And this is the entrance that he dug into it, thinking that there must be valuables of some type. Now this is composed of 2.3 million blocks of hard granite stone. And the average weight is about 5,000 pounds. So 2.3 million, and the stones are not cemented together. They're fitted together, like you fit the pieces of a puzzle. And the stone itself came from about 500 miles away. So these are tremendous construction projects, and we should point out they weren't built by slaves. They're built by free African people, a construction project. Egypt every year at that time was flooded because of the rise of the Nile River. The Nile would rise and fall until they built a dam, I guess in the 50s or 60s, that regulated the rise and fall. So back in ancient times, when the level was high, all these people wouldn't have any work to do. And so they were employed on these construction projects. This is the king who's responsible for that building, which is the Great Pyramid. His name is Khufu. And he also is responsible for this ship. This is the oldest, best preserved ship in the world. It's 4,600 years old. And these are better pictures, I suppose you might say. This is actually bigger than this one. The reason it looks like that is because of the distance between the two. Now, a lot of times you see images of all three of these pyramids and they look like they're real close together, but there's not. There's a considerable distance. And if you go during the summertime, like most of the African American tours, you literally would not want to walk from one to the other. The distance is that great. But when it's close, when you take a picture, they look like they're right on top of each other. These are all pyramid builders. And of course, this man's name is Khafre. He's responsible for this monument, which we call Hormozket of the Great Sphinx. This is a great photograph, if I do say so myself. And then you can see fragments of his face. All these are early pyramid builders. This is the king. These are not his queens. These are two female aspects of God. This one right here is called Het-Heru, or Hathor. And she's identified as a goddess representing love and beauty. She is also known as the Queen of Heaven. Now this is 4,600 years ago. To my knowledge, it's the first time the term heaven is used in Africa. And this one I just love to see. I can't get enough of that. I get a thrill, seriously, when I see a black man and black woman together. We're in danger, and we're ignoring it. Our community is under attack. And again, this isn't about being against anybody, but it's about self-preservation. Okay? And don't they look content to be together? Yeah. Nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of. No climbing through the window at 2 a.m. Of course, I know nobody in Gary would know anything about that, like we do in California. All early pyramid builders. And this is a woman from the Pyramid Age. This man's name is Ta-Hotel. Ta is another aspect of God, dealing with the intellect. Imhotep is important because he has a tomb that has ancient religious literature, and he is credited with having written the first book. Now, Imhotep is called the father of medicine, and he's identified as an early writer as well. But this man actually wrote a book, and it's called The Teachings or Instruction of Imhotep. Look at the hair. This is from the 5th royal family. I started with the pre-dynastic period, and I've gone through 4 dynasties or 4 royal families. Now here's a good one, because I like to talk about the role of women in ancient Egypt and how well respected they were. Now this woman, this is from the 6th dynastic period. She is the mother of a king. And you can see this is a little boy, he's 10 years old at the time. But he looks like an adult, he looks like a little adult. But what is obvious in this photograph is that she is in fact the throne. That the black woman was the seat of power. I think that's very powerful. Now he reigned for 94 years. His name is Pepi II. He was the king of Egypt when he became 10, because there were many boy kings, or at least several, not just King Tut. And he stayed on the throne until he was 104. He is again.
What type of stone was
His
it?
daddy, I believe it's alabaster. Now you see some of these figures painted black, and black denoted deification and divinity in ancient Egypt. And a lot of these, the noses are missing. There's huge controversy as to why they're missing, who knocked them off. I think it had to do with kind of a religious ritual. This one is interesting just because of the back of it. We don't oftentimes see the back of the head. And you can see the hair tied together. And what does it look like? Yeah, it does look like a seashell. I used to have an afro like that one time. The hair is a telltale sign. These are priests. Now we're all the way to Dynasty 12. This is my favorite king. This is in Copenhagen, Denmark. I've been able to photograph this 3 or 4 times now. This is the same king in Cairo, and this is at Cambridge University. During this period of time, the ears are particularly large. I don't know if that's a family trait. I suspect it's some kind of symbolism of the idea the bigger the ear, the more you could hear. The more you heard, the more you would know. The more you knew, the more power you would possess. But you can see it's characteristic of this entire family. This is the first known example of martial arts in the world. Well, here he is right here. He reigned for 45 years. He has an era of great peace and stability, massive building projects, including 2 pyramids. His daughter succeeded him as pharaoh. So when you put all those things together, and then there's so many representations of him. You know, one of the most difficult things about doing these presentations now is that I have so many photographs. It's very, very difficult just to cull a few of them, or even the best ones. Just doing this presentation now, I realize there's so many other pictures that I could use. But anyway, this is an example of early martial arts in Africa before Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. Another one from a tomb of a man and a woman together. You don't find this in the art of ancient Greece and Rome. You will never see, I've never seen, in Roman art or Greek art, a man and a woman together. You either see one or the other. That tells you a lot about their worldview right there. So it would not surprise us to hear the expression, a dog is a man's best friend. In the Greco-Roman world, a woman was a kind of a burden. A child was a burden. And you have infanticide at a very high scale. In Sparta, for example, I'm sure you've heard of these Greek city-states of Athens, Sparta, etc. In all of these cities, there were issues. For example, in ancient Athens, you had to have laws from time to time demanding that a man have sex with his woman from time to time because the birth rates were falling. Okay? And that women would often dress as men to entice their husbands. Now, in all of these cases, in fact, in ancient Greece, the ideal relationship, what's called a platonic relationship, was between an older man and a young boy. That Plato himself, who was the author of platonic relationships, thought that a romantic relationship between a man and a woman was a form of insanity. He thought that if a man fell in love with a woman, he must be crazy, he must be out of his mind. Now in Sparta, it's even beyond that, where when a child is born, it's the right of a parent to abandon that child, especially if it was a girl child. And if he had any kind of deformity, any kind of issue, the child would be abandoned. Okay? And thus, this is where we get the expression, you saw it in this movie, first it played Streetcar Named Desire, where this woman, Blanche Devereaux, I think her name is, maybe I'm getting her mixed up with the woman in the Golden Girls, says, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. That is an ancient European tradition, so that you would abandon a child and a kind stranger might come and pick that child up. Otherwise, the child would just be left in the animals. Well, in Sparta, even if parents decided to keep the child, they would still have to take the child to a council of elders. And that council of elders would decide if that child had a right to live. That's the extent of it. But here you see men and women together in very loving, casual, normal, what I would consider normal relationships. This woman's name is Amos Nefertari, and here she is again. She's very important. She was deified. This is the woman named Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut is the most powerful of the female pharaohs. This is her mother, Queen Amos. This is a sphinx of Hatshepsut. And that darling little girl is my daughter, who I took to Egypt last summer. And I always had that fantasy or that vision, that desire that I wanted my daughter, when she saw the pyramids for the first time, to be with her daddy. She's 12 years old now, and she called me a couple of days ago. She lives in Martinique in the Caribbean. And she says, Daddy, you know what I want you to do when I'm 14? Usually I don't hear from her unless she wants something. So she says, Daddy, you know what I want when I'm 14? I said, what, honey? I want to go to China. And she said, wait a minute, I want to go to Japan. It's exciting to me that my child has that kind of vision. She didn't say, I want a car, I want the latest fashions, which would have been fine, but she wants to go and see the world for herself. Wow, I love that. When I travel to all these museums, you know who I see? Lots of white kids. I don't see our children in these museums. I see them in front of the TV, in front of a tablet, in front on the internet. This is a man named Tutmos III, who is the successor of Hatshepsut. This is God Amen. This is where we get the word amen from. Yeah, believe it or not. Amen. Amen, Amun, means the invisible one, the unseen one, or the hidden one. This is 3,500 years old. Don't stop saying amen. Just, again, the couple is the ideal social unit. Now this is Queen Tai, a young, very powerful queen. This is the most, I guess, popular image we have of her in our community. Look at the hair. And this is her husband. This is Amenhotep III, also known as Amenhotep the Magnificent. This is the family of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. These are two of their daughters. Akhenaten is identified as probably the person that wrote the book of Psalms. And he also is the first man that we know of nonviolence. He inaugurated a revolution in art. Even the fragments of his face are very distinctive, as you can see. Spitting image of Barack Obama. And I tell you something else I have to show you. I have to dig it out. I have one from ancient Egypt that is a spitting image of Michael Jackson. You would think Michael Jackson saw that statue and had his cosmetic surgery based on that. And of course, this is Nefertiti, one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. This is on the cover of the calendar. That's a nice plug. This one is called A Stroll in the Garden. Yes, sir. You know, that's, I guess that's his most important accomplishment. That's what is attributed to him, that Akhenaten is the world's first monotheist. I don't think that's true. Maybe that's why I didn't say that. He's credited with that, but I think Africans always understood that God was one, but that God had different manifestations. All right, let me go through here quickly. These are hair extensions. 3,300 years ago. Okay. King Tut. Speaking of hair, look at the detail. Now these are the people called the Cushites. Remember we were talking about the hoop-tears? My sister, I see a couple of hoop-tears in the room. But that's also associated with that head in Coburg, Germany. And again, this is the mother right here of Ramses the Great. Ramses is the one, this is Ramses, oftentimes associated as being the pharaoh with the biblical Exodus. And these are not from museums. These are actually from a temple at a place called Abydos. Look how bright and vivid the colors remain even now. And this is one of the first examples of an immaculate conception, where this figure has been castrated. His wife takes the form of a bird, flutters over the body, and becomes pregnant and gives birth to a child. Yes. Well, some people say that, but there's no evidence for that. Question is, it was Ramses. Ramses is Greek. Ramses is the African name. Was he the brother of Moses? Now, if you want a book on the subject, you could get a book called Moses and Monotheism by Sigmund Freud, of all people. And he talks about that. So these are, you can see my tours are child-friendly. Look at these massive blocks. And here's something interesting. Now this is from that same temple. Now what do these look like? These are over 3,000 years old. What does that look like? Helicopter or something. This looks like a submarine. And this looks like some kind of spacecraft. I didn't make this up. And you can make whatever you want out of them. I'm not saying, well, hey, I don't know what to tell you. Okay? Just look at the bright, vivid colors. These are all Ramses the Great. This is in Paris, and this is in the courtyard of the University of Paris. And what you have here is a man named Champollion, Jean-Francois Champollion, who is credited with being the European who deciphered ancient Egyptian writing, so-called hieroglyphics. And in this statue, he's standing atop the head of Ramses the Great. Now, Champollion was a European that I have to say loved Africa and had great respect for Africa. And I'm sure he would have been very, very angry at the way this statue was constructed, because that would not have been what he would have done. Now, here's Ramses the Great, and here's Nefertari. This is another woman named Nefertari. You have a woman named Amos Nefertari, you have Nefertiti, you have Nephra. The root of the word is Nefer, an African word that means beauty. Another loving couple. I don't know if she's an acrobat. A colleague of mine insists that she's doing yoga. And I always joke around and say, I could easily get on this table and do all these, the same thing, but I don't want to move all these artifacts aside. This is Ramses III. Let me finish with Egypt because I want to show you. This is from ancient Lebanon. This is a woman named Amenirtis. This is a powerful pharaoh named Taharka, who's mentioned in the Bible. I think book of Isaiah, the second book of Kings, if I have it right. He was the king when Jerusalem was being attacked by the Assyrians. Let me wrap it up. This one, interestingly enough, is in the Vatican. There are 13 museums in the Vatican, including an Egyptian museum. This is in a place called Kerma, and this is a colleague of mine, Tony Browder, right here, looking at these statues. This is south of Egypt in a place called Sudan. And you have 300 pyramids there. And I took a group there last summer. We spent the night out there. Yeah, you had to really want it to be on that tour. Scorpions, jackals, all kinds of sounds like you never heard before. No electricity, no running water, none of that. And we all slept in little tents out in the desert. And if you wanted to use the bathroom, you had to get up in the middle of the night and walk out in the dark and hope you didn't stumble on anybody or nobody stumbled on you. And this is where we were. This is Cleopatra right here, the seventh. Here she is again. Now, I was an English lady who told me about this. She's the one who found out that Cleopatra had an African mother. And she told me, she worked at the University of Cambridge, she told me she got so many death threats that she had to quit her job. It's a white lady. These are all Nubians. And here's your picture of Jesus the Christ, which is also in the calendar. And you can see for yourself how he was portrayed in ancient times. The hair, the black skin, and all his disciples are the same. And the one that's pointing to the wound in his side is St. Thomas, doubting Thomas, who didn't believe. Now here it is right here, it's in the calendar. That's another incentive for you to buy one, yes. This lady was the curator of the Egyptian and Sudanese collection at Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge University. And she did research. She's the leading authority in the world on Cleopatra VII. And she revealed that Cleopatra's mother was in fact an African woman. I don't know about that. If she had said her daddy was black, she'd probably be dead now. I guess so. This is during what's called the Ptolemaic dynasty. And this is a non-African dynasty, but apparently there were some African people in it. Now, let me finish. Other parts of Africa, this is the world's oldest known, or one of the oldest known counting sticks. It's called the Ashango bone, it's 25,000 years old. Ancient African harpoons, this is from Tunisia, and these are the remains of the ancient city of Carthage from Nigeria. Zimbabwe. So my point is that civilization is continent-wide. This is a young archaeologist in the country of Eritrea, in the Horn of Africa. And that's where these artifacts are right here. So civilization in Africa wasn't just in Egypt. Look at this, isn't this beautiful? The people in this area of Eritrea call this God's seat. And I visited all these places. And here I am with the senior archaeologist there. All these are from, this is a castle in Ethiopia, castles. This is supposed to be the entrance to the bath or the palace of the Queen of Sheba. This is one of the most magnificent churches in the world. It's a rock church carved in the ground. Suppose you came right here and started digging and you dug hundreds of feet in the ground and constructed a church. You can see the cross on the top. This is a better picture of it. And then this is what the actual church looks like. The local people believe the angels built this. Ancient African literature. And we'll quickly go around the world. From ancient Iraq and Iran and China, Japan, and these are all from Vietnam. These are all over 1,000 years old. This is long before slavery. That's one of the big problems with Black History Month. We seem to start with slavery. From Indonesia and Thailand, China again, Thailand, Vietnam, from ancient Greece, ancient Italy, Greece. I think I want to finish by showing you some pieces from ancient America, and we'll call it a day. And you can see I'm just real low key today. I'm just showing the pictures and letting them speak for themselves. All right, let's finish with this section right here. Now this is from ancient Italy. So you have a black figure on one side and the other side is Hercules. And this is in the Vatican. These are all from ancient Italy. Now this reminds me of some of the images that we see of Christ carrying the lamb, a little white pyramid in Rome. We had a psychiatrist named Frances Welsing. I wish I could have shared this with her because she would have done a field day. She would talk about the big brown pyramids in Africa and the little white pyramid in Rome. I'm sure she would see something about that. This is from ancient Rome, an African emperor of Rome, from Florence, Italy, one of the wise kings who came to pay homage to the Christ child in the manger of Bethlehem. This is one of the three kings who came to pay homage to the Christ child in the manger of Bethlehem in European Christian mythology about 500 years ago. Doesn't he look distinguished? And I have a lot of these. I have a book down the road, and I'm going to focus on the images of the black in European Renaissance. This is a nice one right here. You can see the three kings. The European king, the Asian king, although he looks European, and the Ethiopian king. The Ethiopian is the one who's farthest away. He's the youngest. One brings the gift of frankincense, one brings the gift of gold, one brings the gift of myrrh. And the brother is the one with the myrrh. And you can see his attendants in the back. This is in a museum in Munich, Germany. I just want to get to these on Europe. I'm sorry, on the Americas, and we can finish. This is a painting by Rembrandt. I got your attention on that one, huh? This is in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. Yeah. Now, there are variations of this one. There's one in the Art Institute of Chicago, I think. But there's another one I just saw in Leipzig, Germany. There are 3 or 4 of these. All right, finally. The Olmec heads, which attest to an African presence in America before Columbus and before slavery. And you can see the features speak for themselves. There are 20 of these heads. This one is called El Rey, or the King. And these are about 4,000 years old. Actually closer to 3,000. Still a long time. Yes. There are 20 of them, and I've been able to see every one of them. This is one of the smaller ones. An astronomer, but they call it a monkey looking to the sky. That doesn't look like a monkey to me. Well, people wrote this description. Mexico. In fact, it's in Villahermosa. An Olmec tomb. The Olmec are important to us because they represent the first civilization of the Americas. This is the biggest one. It's 40 tons. This is the first one that was excavated. And this is the one with the braids in the back. One of them has braids or cornrows, which you can see. Now, this is 1,500 years before slavery, 2,500 years before Columbus. This one is called El Negro, the black. Look. These are all from ancient Mexico. This is in Canada. And this is where the Blue Nile and the White Nile joins together, north of Khartoum. And this is, I'll end with this. Black is beautiful. We know that. I hope we know it. You wouldn't be here if you didn't think that. But being black and powerful will be even better. Let's work for that. Because this is really what this is all about. This is about empowerment. That's what history does. History is a people's story. It tells you who you are. It gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a sense of dignity. It tells you what you can aspire towards. Now, we need this, but I think our young people really, really, really need it. And that can change the world. This is not about hate, this is about love. A dose of self-love. And I'm fortunate enough to come out here, I think like 5 or 6 times now. It's like an annual thing to come to this wonderful institution in Gary. And it's interesting, I think this is the biggest crowd I've had so far. So I feel good, and I want to thank Pastor Jackson. And I think we'll still have some time for questions and answers and discussions. All right? Yeah, while I'm at it, Pastor, take the microphone. Let me see if I can dig these photographs up.
While Dr. Rashidi does that, he's going to dig some photos out. He's got to answer this question, then we'll come over to that question. While he's looking for that photo, remember he mentioned Imhotep? Yeah. And Imhotep is, you know, one of those standout figures, and as Dr. Rashidi said, he wasn't a king, but he was one of the first multi-geniuses. So you just heard Dr. Rashidi point out his father, medicine. He designed one of the pyramids. He was also a musician. And I raised that up because, remember the movies, there was a series of them called The Mummy? In one of those series, they disparaged and disrespected us as a people because they depicted Imhotep as a villain, as a crazed person. Now, you only do that to people who don't know their history and who don't know their culture. And very few people got upset about it. I did. I stopped watching the series of movies because of that. Because they disparaged one of the greatest persons in history, Imhotep. And that's another point to why this is important. The other point, and I was trying to make it this week, the movie Black Panther is a wonderful movie. That is an incredible movie. I'm so glad it was made, especially because I grew up reading the comic book. So, you know, when Marvel started doing the comic book heroes, I was wondering if they were ever going to get to do one on Black Panther. My son, oldest son, I was talking with him the other day, and he said, "Daddy, you remember the first comic book you gave me? It was Black Panther." And so it's great. I really celebrate that, you know, in all the conversation, Wakanda, you know, this beautiful place. It's fiction, though. This is the real deal. Yeah, and see, that fiction now gives you an idea as we look at the real deal, what can really be made into a movie. You hear what I'm saying? Now I'm praying that the hoopla and the hype that has attached itself to Black Panther, and it should, will now manifest itself into movies made that are about the real deal, that will blow your mind, you know, even more than Black Panther. Because as Dr. Rashidi has just given us just a glimpse, a snippet, you get an idea of what African civilization from the north to the south, from the east to the west of the continent have done. It was just, we're talking about a normal thing to be exceptional. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. Did you get it?
I can show you 2 of them.
There are actually 4, but I can show you 2 easily. Maybe I'll find the others. This is from Europe. And this is what scientists, BBC, at least say the first people in Europe look like. And then I'll show you one from the Americas. Again, I apologize. My computer just went out on me last week, and I had to buy a new one. And you know, I have to go through and adjust all the settings and find them. And this is Lucia. This is a reconstruction of what the first person in the Americas looked like. Now, if I can dig them out, I'll show you one of Cheddar Man, what they're calling cheddar because it was not like cheddar cheese. but they found it in a place called Cheddar, England, and also the first modern human, a reconstruction, which is actually found in Morocco. All black people. There's no question about it. And I think a lot of times when I do these presentations, some of us feel even black people feel defensive. As a Runoko, you shouldn't be talking about that. And you certainly shouldn't be talking about it in mixed company, because some of us are embarrassed. Yeah, because we want to make everybody else feel comfortable at our expense. You know. But now these are European scientists who are doing this kind of work. Yeah, I think the root of the problem is our indoctrination. Carter G. Woodson, who was the father of Black History Week, Negro History Week that became Black History Month, used to say, if you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. So we want to change our thinking. What are we taught to think about ourselves? All things negative. And especially the root, that Africa is the worst place it ever was. So a lot of people don't want to, even black people themselves, don't want to identify with Africa, because we've been taught that that's where Tarzan comes from and King Kong comes from. Maybe this movie Black Panther will change that. Is Black Panther set in Africa itself, or is it set in an urban setting in the United States? It's a futuristic film. I haven't seen it.
It's supposed to be out.
But it's positive.
Yeah.
Well, hey, can't expect any more
Wakanda
than
is
that.
supposed to be in Africa.
Okay, good. Movie critics.
Question.
I just had a quick question.
Mhm.
There's some controversy recently about a statute of Nefertiti. Do
Yeah.
you know what that's all about?
White folks trying to claim ancient Egyptians were were white. I don't know the details of it. People have shown it to me. I've seen pictures of it, but I just treat it with contempt. The question is about Nefertiti. There's a recent controversy, I guess we could call it a controversy, surrounding Nefertiti. Apparently, you have this old image of Nefertiti, which I'm going to show you, and a reconstruction of it that apparently, just reiterates the claim that somehow the ancient Egyptians were not black people at all, even though Egypt is in Africa. Let me show you the head. Now, this one I do have, it's hand. Where is it? Yeah, this is what somebody posted tonight.
Yeah, that's the one.
Mhm.
Good Morning America, I think.
See, all of it this was on Good Morning America.
Yeah, it was.
See, these programs have huge impact. The media is very powerful. That's why I guess Black Panther is so powerful. Because, images are profound. That's why I show you pictures and not just give speeches. In fact, I don't even get loud anymore. I just sit down and get a computer and a projector and say, okay, there it is. Now you go with it and do what you want. Yes?
Two things. Hold it to you.
Okay. Two things. As far as black people being portrayed as white people,
Yeah.
I'm 71 years old, but I can remember in the 5th grade,
Mm-hmm.
social studies, all the Egyptians were white. Every one of them. In the book that we learned social studies out of, geography out of.
What year was that?
When I was in the 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
We don't even have to go there.
right.
I'm almost willing to bet you that if you got a 5th grade book today, that same image, Egypt would still be portrayed as white.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm just saying.
I can almost guarantee it.
They've been doing that a long time. As a matter of fact, all of our history has been, anything great has been attributed to Europeans, the white race, and all of our stuff.
We got a couple of questions.
Okay,
So we have a lot of work to do.
yes, right, that's right. And the work that we have to do, speaking of the work that we have to do, we have to organize ourselves to control our own history, to control Africa, to control our own affairs, control our schools and educational system, and get our scientists and researchers like you to give us a real history. But a whole lot of work got to be done first. And I am a product of Pan-Africanism.
Same here.
And didn't leave.
That's the world's first human. That's a piece from Morocco. I know I cut you off, but I found a picture I wanted, and then you see for yourself. That's a reconstruction of a man that supposedly lived 160,000 years ago. And from Africa, 160,000. And from Africa, they went out to people the rest of the world. So this is the first known variation of humanity, because Africans went into Europe and got caught up in that ice and were transformed physically. We are the product of our environment. I could be wrong, but it seems to me that y'all might get a little paler here in the wintertime because there's no sun. And then when the sun comes out, people let's get the suntan. So you magnify that by 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years. So this is what accounts for variations in physical types. But what is most important to me, hey, there's Dr. Hicks in the background. Now I'm going to be at the university tomorrow. You want to tell us quickly where I'm going to be? Oh, good.
I brought flyers. We're going to have Dr. Rashidi at Ivy Northwest in the Savannah Center in the auditorium at 6 p.m. Tomorrow. So I brought those flyers so that you could share them with people who would love to come who may have missed today. And I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, my sister.
For this wonderful information, and I know that you will love Black Panther. I went to see it yesterday, and it depicts Black people and Black women in particular in a very positive way. So you will love it.
Okay.
Okay. And thank you again for the
Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
And we're gonna get to,
And then I have another talk at Purdue on Tuesday. I might as well move here.
Right. I want to thank Dr. Hicks for coming out, supporting us, even though you will be over there with her. That's what Africans do. We support one another. We are not in competition with one another. And so I should be over there tomorrow evening also. So.
Okay. Who is the next question?
I was noticing all the body piercing on the ears, and what I used to hear, that was showing that you belonged to somebody, to a slave master, and then when I went on the internet, I read that ear piercing was with the metal in the ears was protected from evil things coming into the eardrum. You know, like people saying some people trying to keep all the evil out. And I was just wondering, did you know why some of the ear piercing was done?
I don't think there's any one reason. I think you're talking about different cultures, different times, different civilizations, different countries. So I wouldn't want to generalize about that. Okay? Let me show you all these now. This is just as we deal with the Q&A. This just shows the variation or diversity of African people. Not all Black people are dark. And a lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with intermingling. These are the people called the San. I visited with them last summer. So you can see here, and these are more people from Morocco, and these are people in the South Pacific. So, you know, not mixed. So you could see everybody could come from us. You know, Black people are the first blondes. You can trace blondism in Black people 30,000 years ago. And these are people I've been with and seen. These are not just people I read about or you know, did a Google search. So travel is so amazing because you see so much and you learn so much. And you know, mostly what you learn is about yourself. You realize how deeply instilled the values you have are. Now we wear these nice African clothes and we have many of us African names and we have an ankh around our neck and we might know a few words of Swahili and Twi and we know how to say hotel. But this American experience is deeply ingrained in our psyche. And it will take generations before we purge ourselves of the ugly American because a lot of times we don't even realize it's in there.
That's right.
Who has the next question?
I have a question. Earlier, at the beginning of your presentation, mentioned someone was sent, I'm sorry, excuse me. Thank you. Earlier, when you first began your presentation, you said someone sent civilization to Spain. What were you, who were you
Okay.
referring to?
That's a good question. You know, you have the first humanity in Europe, and then you have the first civilizations in Europe, the Greeks, and the Romans especially. We talk about them a lot. And then you have the barbarians who come into Europe, or who bring about the fall of the Roman Empire. The Vandals, the Huns, the Saxons, the Franks, many of them, the Gauls. So Rome comes to an end, the Roman Empire comes to an end. And then you have the rise of Islam, and you have African people who are forcibly converted to Islam. And these people are the ones called the Moors. And the Moors reintroduced civilization to Spain after the fall of the Roman Empire. So when Rome is sacked, I think in the 5th century, I mean, Europeans fall into a really, really decadent state of existence. Libraries are almost unknown, learning is almost unknown, bathing is considered a kind of a sin. These are what are called the Dark Ages. And it is the Moors from Northwest Africa who reintroduced civilization, who told Europeans, you should change your clothes from time to time, and bathing will not hurt you. And this is what a library looks like. This is a book. And this is a new form of agriculture. They introduce oranges and apples and things of that nature. All those basic things. So when I say reintroduce civilization to Europe, a broad civilization, that's what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, I have two things I'd like to ask.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'd like to ask about the Sumerian culture.
The Sumerians, okay.
Yes, particularly the Code of Hammurabi.
Okay.
Back in the Code of Hammurabi in comparison to the Maya. And also, a lot of people get confused about the word or the person Africa. Where did it come from?
Okay.
And they're associated with Europeans, generals, and Roman actually.
Mm-hmm.
But according to Josephus, Flavius Josephus, the great historian,
Jewish historian.
He says that the man Africa was a descendant of Midian. And we know that the Midians were called Ethiopians, which is like, for example, the 12th chapter of Numbers, where it talks about Moses marrying Zipporah. Zipporah was a Midianite, her father was Jethro. And he goes on, Josephus goes on to say this particular Midian had children. And they, quite naturally, these are descendants of Abraham. And one of Midian's sons was named Ophrin. And Ophrin's name was Africa. And so he documents this and actually uses Berosus, who was the Egyptian historian, to back up his claim. So, what is your take on how Africa got its name? And what is your take on the Code of Hammurabi and the impact it had on the Sumerian culture?
All right, let's do the second part first. The Sumerians, Sumer is a civilization in what is now southern Iraq. It began at the base of the Persian Gulf and went about 300 miles north. It's the first great civilization of Southwest Asia. The Sumerians pioneered things like mathematics, astronomy, pharmacy, all of those things. Now there's an element that the Sumerians call themselves the black-headed people. And we think, at least some of us, think that that has an ethnic connotation to it. If you examine the physical remains of the Sumerians, they are identical with other African people. Eyewitness accounts. Now, the Code of Hammurabi actually comes a little bit after that. Hammurabi was not a Sumerian, he, I guess, is what we would call a Babylonian. So Babylonian and Chaldean civilization, the Assyrians, are all the offshoots, are influenced by Sumer. Okay. Now, in terms of the origins of the term Africa, I'll have to go back and review Josephus. I didn't Flavius Josephus. I didn't know that was in there. So I'd have to go back and review that. Berosus himself was not an Egyptian. I think he himself is a Babylonian or comes from that. But I think that there are a lot of theories about where the word Africa comes from. For example, there are people going around quite foolishly saying that the name Africa comes from a Roman general, Scipio Africanus. Actually, Scipio Africanus got his name from Africa. It implies basically conqueror of Africa. So one of the things we can say from your reference about Josephus and even the references to Scipio Africanus is that the name Africa has been in use for a very, very long time. There's a scholar named Gerald Massey who has a book called Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World, an English scholar who says that Africa is rooted in an indigenous term to Africa called Afro-Ika, or birthplace. So to answer your question, I'm not certain, and I don't know if anybody really is. Any other questions? The calendars are $30, and mostly it's a collector's item. There are only a few of them, and they have many of my best photographs. So I know 2018 is already, we're early in the year, but the calendars are still very valid. And of course, the other books. Another item I have, which is brand new, is a timeline on Nile Valley history. It's not made of paper, it's made of vinyl. So that's $20, and then you have the DVDs and a series of books, including the children's books, and you can use a credit card if you like. I'd be happy to swipe it. Next question. Are there any other questions?
Right over here.
Yes.
They say that the Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates went to the university in Africa?
Well, I think the biggest claim to that is in the book Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, which was published in the middle 1950s, where he argued that Greek philosophy wasn't Greek at all, it was just stolen African philosophy. And I do know that Aristotle was the primary tutor of Alexander. And there's a story, I assume it's historically accurate, where when Alexander comes into Egypt as a world conqueror, Aristotle is right there and he's gathering up the various papyri. And this became the basis of the Library of Alexandria. I'm not sure Plato came to Africa. Socrates, I'm not sure either, but I know Pythagoras did. And I know the Greek philosopher Thales came, and that Solon came, Herodotus, the historian, came. So at the very least, the Greeks were profoundly influenced by ancient Egypt. And why not? This is where the greatest civilization in the world existed. This is before slavery. So there was no reason for Europeans or anybody to look down on Africa at all. They wanted to go there. And so this is just how the world has changed. So what the transatlantic slave trade did was change the power dynamics in the world. It changed the way we came to see Africa, and sadly, it changed the way Africa came to see itself. So now African people in general, especially the descendants of Africa and the Americans as a result of enslavement, have a tendency to look down on Africa and have a very negative attitude about Africa. Now, if we come from Africa, we might as well get used to it. We come from Africa, and you have a negative attitude about Africa, then what does that say? You can't hate the roots of the tree and not hate the fruits of the tree. Europeans don't be like that. They're mad at you if you don't celebrate St. Patrick's Day. They're gonna pinch you if you don't wear green. They celebrate, Italian Americans are proud of Columbus, even though Columbus was a monster and is almost single-handedly responsible for the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade and the near genocide of Native Americans, but Italians celebrate Columbus. But when it comes to Africa, most of us want to run from it, okay? So we are unusual here in this church, and that we are trying to embrace Africa. Just look at the beautiful clothes that we have on today, many of us. But that's unusual, but it's a process. What we're trying to do is win the hearts and souls and minds of our people, especially our young people. And I'll tell you one other thing. When you consider what we have gone through and the horrors of enslavement and invasion and colonization, it's a minor miracle that we are in this room today. Because the weaker people would have perished right now. We are a very strong and resilient group of folk. And we have to really give our ancestors the nod for what they have survived. What we're going through today is nothing compared to what we have gone. Stony the road we have trod, and yet somehow we are here today to talk about the redemption of Africa and the preservation of our community. That's a miracle.
One more question.
I have a question over here. Is there any place in the country where our history is being taught? Because as you can see here, we don't have young people here, and you keep alluding to it.
Well, we got a few of them. You know, who's a young person here? Raise my hand. Okay. So we got a few, so don't.
I'm saying I'm talking about young people because all of these younger people are out of school. Here's a community of African Americans, and we don't even teach African history in the schools. When I graduated from high school 40 years ago in East Chicago, they cut out African history. So we picked it and rallied, and they brought it back. And as soon as I graduated, they got rid of it. So where can we say? Where can we? Where is it going on? Where it's been taught? In Chicago, they have a rule. They have a law, and they have not even lived up to the law in Chicago that said they would teach African history.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we have to make them stick to that law or adhere to that law. But it's a struggle. Nobody says it's easy. There are private schools. People are doing a lot of homeschooling now. So we have a duty to make sure that this information is not lost. We have a golden legacy that we have to maintain. And it's up to us.
One more question. Last question.
I just wanted to share that there's a facility in North Carolina called BRICS, sponsored by the United Church of Christ Southern Conference. And we do a lot of things like this. And there are youth from all over the Southern Conference and other conferences of the United Church of Christ who go to learn about things like this.
All right, here's another Nubian with that hoop earring. So again, what we've done today is just a drop in the bucket, but it's very important. You know, what we're talking about is a process. It's not an event. You're not going to do it in one day. You're not going to transform the way we see the world in a day or a year or 10 years. But every generation has to contribute towards that process. And again, we wanted to focus on something beyond enslavement, because that is the emphasis on Black History Month. So it's up to us. We can make the world any way we want to. We're the ones we've been waiting for. You can't expect the descendants of the people who enslaved and oppressed and abused us in every way to all at once say African history is a wonderful thing and we want to help y'all, reconstruct it. This is our job. It's not easy, but it's doable. Look at the work that I'm doing. With very few resources. Look at the people who came out today. Pastor's been bringing me here for years. So I consider this church a kind of a liberated zone, and we need to support him.
Yes.
Okay. Because everybody doesn't want to see this. I could be wrong, but I would imagine there are even some people in the congregation who are not happy about this. So we have work to do, and it's up to us to do it. And if we don't do it, whose fault is that? What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told. And it's up to us to tell that story. The African proverb goes, until the lion has an historian, the hunter will always be a hero. We are lions and lionesses. And it's up to us to tell that story without apologizing, without whispering, without stammering, without fear of the consequences. Let the truth stand on its own merit. We don't have to make stuff up. This isn't about hate, this is about love. Our history is very powerful. We have the greatest story that's barely been told, and it's up to us to tell it. So God bless you, and thank you for coming out today.
Come on, put your hands together. Do me one favor real quick. Extend your right hand up here. Because this brother travels all over the world. We want eternal protection for him, and we want the eternal spirit to strengthen him. And so eternal spirit, continue to travel with this brother as he continues to carry on the legacy of ancestors who right now are encouraging him on and who have set him on this task. And we say Ashe. All right. Come on up, check out the product, shake his hand.
Thank you everyone for being here. The march, just one, NAACP is sponsoring a march.
A bus trip to Indianapolis Thursday morning, 6 o'clock. The bus will be leaving